Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell. And you know how I love to bring to you and have conversations with leaders who are focused on their own growth and development and also committed to the growth of their people. Well, my guest today has both of those in spades, and he also has a third area, and that is with his own customers in his business, Learnit. He is helping them grow and learn. So I'm delighted to welcome to my show today, Damon Lembi. Hi, Damon.
Meredith, thank you for the warm introduction, and it's great to be here today.
Well, I also want to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Denise Griffiths, who was kind enough to introduce me to you. She just knew you would be a great fit for my show, and she was absolutely right. So a big shout out to my fellow podcaster, Denise.
I'd have to say Denise is one of the most kind and giving person I know. So, yeah, thank you, Denise.
Yes, she's awesome.
She's awesome.
So before we jump into our conversation, Damon, let people know a little bit about you. Mm-hmm. For nearly 3 decades, Damon has led his company, Learnit, through the ever-changing landscape of learning and development, gaining insights into what works, how great leaders learn, and why learn-it-all companies outpace their competition. Coming to business from a career in baseball, Damon brings an athlete's perspective on leadership and training to his informal mentoring of executives, and he's distilled those hard-won insights into his best-selling book, The Learn-It-All Leader: Mindset, Traits, and Tools. I'm looking forward to getting into some of the key ideas from your book. Damon, let's start a little bit with your journey from baseball to a learning company, and tell us also about the beginnings of Learnit, so my listeners who aren't familiar with your business get a better appreciation for it.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe we've been in business pretty similar times, right? I think you started your assessments close to 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So my backstory is I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I still live one exit over the Golden Gate Bridge in Sausalito. Great family, oldest of 4 kids. And for me, Meredith, growing up was all about family and sports. And when I was a senior in high school, I was lucky enough to be drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 13th round of the 1995 draft to go into the minor leagues. And that was really my first tough decision. Do I go the minor league route, or do I take a full scholarship and play baseball at Pepperdine? I took the full scholarship in Pepperdine, and this is something I talk a lot about in my book, and it's because I believed in the vision of what our coach had. You know, he said a very clear vision, which was to win the College World Series, which is, to be honest, unheard of for such a small university, D1 university. So I go to Pepperdine, and, you know, I was All-American in high school, but when I got there, Meredith, everybody was as good as I was. And I dealt with the imposter syndrome a lot. And I was a little homesick and a lot homesick. I got hurt and I ended up leaving. And I had to stop over 1 year in a junior college. And I ended up playing baseball at Arizona State University for the legendary Jim Brock. Got to play in the College World Series, hit a home run in the College World Series. And I was really ready to continue my baseball career. You know, like, what's next? Get into the minor leagues. I always thought you would play until, you know, you couldn't compete anymore. Unfortunately, I didn't get drafted, and it was really depressing. I was 22 years old. I could have gone the independent route, but I chose not to. And I had my first kind of like identity crisis. You know, my whole life I've been a baseball player. Here I was, and I was very fortunate to come from a family of entrepreneurs, especially my father and my grandfather. And we had all types of businesses, from large real estate company to in San Francisco to a hotel chain to a savings and loan and even a Chinese restaurant. And I wasn't sure if my skills were transferable. And so here I was in 1995, and I saw that my dad was starting Walt Lembi, a computer training company, and called Learnit. And the reason he started Learnit, Meredith, is what a lot of great entrepreneurs do. They want to go out and solve their own problem. And maybe it's something, a product that exists, but they want to 10x it. And that's what Walt Lembi did. He said there's got to be a better way to do it, a better way to make learning more engaging and more affordable to reach the masses even. And so we started off with Microsoft Office training. I came in as a receptionist for Learnit. And I did that for several reasons. One, again, I wasn't sure if my skills were transferable. And two, I wanted to prove to the other 15 or 20 other people that I belonged there. That wasn't just my dad putting me at the senior level. So fast forward about 7 years, I answered more phones than anybody else. I taught classes, I did sales, and about 7 years since I started, they were looking to replace the CEO. I threw in my hat, and Learnit over the years has pivoted from just a computer training company to being a corporate learning and development corporate training company. I've been the CEO for the past 20 some odd years. And I'm thrilled to say, we've upskilled and helped reskill up to, I believe it's about 1.8 million individuals over the years. So never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would end up in the learning and development role, but here we are.
Well, I'm so glad you are, so that we could be together today, and also just the impact that you've had. And I know one of the key things that influenced your own leadership style was the coaches that you had, and back in baseball. And I think it was 3 different Hall of Fame coaches, if I'm right. So tell us, what are some of the key lessons you learned from them that you apply in your business today?
Yeah, and at the time, I didn't really realize what was going through. I played for 3 college Division I and a junior college Hall of Fame coaches. Some of the key lessons I learned was, one, I mentioned before, setting clear vision. Also getting your team, on the same page, collaborative, and to hold each other accountable. That's really a big one. Obviously, you play to win, but you do it with integrity. That's some of the other great lessons I've learned. And one of my favorite stories is a coach by the name of Andy Lopez at Pepperdine. And Meredith, he had 2 rules. It was show up on time and do the right thing. And show up on time is pretty self-explanatory. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. Do the right thing. Sometimes people are like, well, what do you mean, coach? What is the right thing? And he'd always say to me and everybody else, what the right thing is. Just go out and do that at all times, if people are watching or not watching. And, as a leader, people are always watching you. So those are all things I learned around, and a vision too, like I mentioned, but also kind of setting moonshot goals. Like Coach Lopez said, we're going to win the College World Series. After I got hurt and left, they won the College World Series, which was super exciting for them.
That's great. Did you ever have any coaches who you also learned lessons from because of their poor leadership?
Absolutely. Now, it doesn't matter who it was, and because I grew up, I didn't really have any jobs. I played baseball throughout the world for some pretty significant coaches, and I've learned, how not to lead from them. A specific example I like to bring up is, I'm a big believer that if you celebrate wins, if you win or things go well, or a product is launched, give the credit, Meredith, to your team. Make them the stars. Put them at the forefront. And this particular individual I'm thinking about, made it all about him all the time. He was in the press release about, what a great strategy I made here, pitching decision, lineup change. So, and that really demotivates your team. They don't want to come to you with new ideas, especially in the business world. And the other thing was playing the victim role. I've had the same individual, if things go poorly, instead of standing up in front of his team and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to take ownership of this. It's my responsibility. This is my team. It's like, let's learn it. I could be 5 levels removed from the decision, and things go wrong, but it's still on me for it going wrong. So, great leaders, I believe, take the blame and support their team, do their very best to allow them that space and the resources to try things and not worry about them making mistakes, because mistakes will happen. Just learn from those mistakes.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious what your own approach is when one of your team members does make a mistake. How do you help them learn from it so that mistake doesn't happen again?
That's a great question. And, I've evolved over the years as a leader. Early on, I wanted to win all the time. I didn't want to make mistakes. And what I've learned is that you got to be patient, and when I bring people on board to Learnit, one of the first things I tell them after I've had a chance to interview them is, if you come in here and you're on the railroad tracks and all you do is exactly what you're told, you're not a good fit for here. I want you to try things. I want you to make mistakes. I want us to learn. I want us to evolve and grow. Because I'm a big believer that, and I talk about this in my book, that real growth only happens if you have courage and you make bold decisions and you get out of your comfort zone. A great example was about 2 months ago, I was filming something, and it was about an hour and a half long for my book. And at the end of it, we found out that it didn't record well, that it just didn't work. And my media team, they reached out to me, the 2 of them, and they said, hey, Damon, we got an issue. We messed up. It didn't record well. I don't know if we could save the content, but we're going to own the mistake. Now, Meredith, they could have turned around and blamed it on anything else, the technology, my internet, whatever. But, was I thrilled that this mistake happened? No, but I allowed them to, I took a step back. I said, what do we learn and what are we going to do differently? So that's kind of how I've learned to evolve over the years.
Mm-hmm. That's such an important aspect. And what it tells me is that you have modeled that yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because the people who work with us are watching what we say and do. And if they were willing to take ownership, that says to me that you have an environment where people find it safe and okay to own up to mistakes and not try to hide, cover up, blame somebody else. So
absolutely. I'm kind of a big fan on, it's okay to make mistakes. Let's not try to make the same mistakes all the time. Let's learn from those mistakes, and let's learn and do and make different mistakes. So if something goes wrong and you're doing a post-mortem or whatever, I hope people are taking notes and learning and trying new things. So I try to lead that way. I also believe that in today's world, I'm sure you talk a lot about this, but it's important as leaders to be vulnerable, to admit that they don't have all the answers, to be humble, and because you can't have all the answers. And that's really what my book's all about, the difference between being a know-it-all and a learn-it-all.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit more about that distinction. How do you characterize the learn-it-all leader from the know-it-all leader, just so my listeners will kind of evaluate for themselves, where do I fall in these 2 different areas?
Yeah. So let me start with the know-it-alls. And, the know-it-alls are the ones who come with all the answers. They got everything figured out. Their way is the right way. And a recent story that just happened a week ago is I have a friend who is a fractional CRO, and he, very sharp individual. But one of his new clients told him, hey, so-and-so, you're coming across, too aggressive and too, you brag too much. I wish you could, I would like you to listen more and ask questions and maybe even take a step back. And this gentleman shared this with me, and he said, what do you think? And I said, I think it's fabulous that this woman, early on in your relationship had the courage to tell you what was going on. This is a very successful leader. And, to be honest, he got defensive, and I don't think he's going to make any changes. It's his way. And I don't know if that's going to work out too well for him with that engagement. Now, the opposite, let's take a learn-it-all leader, is somebody who surrounds himself with great talent, opens up for feedback. So people at all levels can come to you and say, "Hey, Damon, I watched your podcast on Grow Strong Leaders. I think you did a good job, but maybe you could have answered this differently." Because you invite feedback instead of getting defensive. And I really believe, and I say it in my book, that great leaders aren't born, they're not made either, they're in the making. So you're continuously, and I'm sure you believe in this, I mean, with all you do with your wonderful podcast and the work you do, you're continuously evolving as a leader. Yeah. And to take a step back, for those of you, for your listeners who are maybe a solopreneur or maybe even just a parent, which is nothing wrong, to me, or individual contributor, leadership starts with self-leadership. We're all leaders. We all can hold ourselves accountable. We can all be curious. We can all ask questions. We all have that opportunity to learn and grow. And not everybody, Meredith, is cut out for leading a team. There's some great individuals out there who have the technical skills, whether it's in engineering, sales, accounting, but they don't want to lead a team, but they can still be great leaders in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you're describing there are influencers, because of who they are being, how they show up, people respect them and want to listen to them. They don't have to have the title or the position in order to really have an impact on people. I want to go a little bit deeper with curiosity, because that is one of my, favorite topics in terms of what leaders can do. And help if someone thinks I'm a little bit too much of a know-it-all, curiosity is a great place to start to make that shift to becoming more of a learn-it-all. And I would love to hear you share, what are some ways that you express curiosity with people on your team to learn more from them and help them see you're not trying to give them the answers?
That's a great question. And curiosity is one of the 4 key traits in my book: humility, curiosity, integrity, and courage, stepping out of your comfort zone. Curiosity is really, really key. And what I think, a lot of it comes down to listening, really listening. And I wrote an article somewhere in Fast Company, and it talked a lot about, not formulating a decision while somebody else is talking, keeping an open mind, being flexible, that maybe there is a different way to do things, and I can't remember off the top of my head who said this quote, but I love it. Hold strong opinions lightly, and so I think a lot of that. And one thing that isn't always easy, but I've gotten better at over the years, is you can learn something from everybody. Everybody you come in contact with is more of an expert at something than you are. And so if somebody drops me into some party, I've got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and there's a bunch of parents I've never met, I try to make a real habit of asking them questions and listening. I'm a big believer in being more interested than interesting. And sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone. One of my really good friends is in the crypto world, and I don't know anything about the crypto world. And so maybe I ask dumb questions, but I sit there and listen and I learn. Let me put it back on you, because curiosity is so important. How do you go about, and how do you share with your listeners to become better at being curious?
I think part of it is keeping an open mind when you go into a conversation, and have the attitude of not waiting for your turn to talk, but, as you say, to really listen to someone else. And especially someone, as you were talking, I was envisioning, it's easy to say in theory and even in practice, until you are getting ready to interact with someone that maybe you've had conflict with in the past, or you've had tension. You're bringing this previous experience into this conversation, which can color the way you listen and what you're actually able to hear. So starting with that fresh mind, I
Mhm.
think is so important, and assuming the best
Mhm.
of the other person, not attributing a negative motive or a negative intention before you even get involved in the conversation. I think those are so important. I have found that how I show up has
Mhm.
everything to do with how the conversation goes.
I love that. And for your listeners out there who are in sales, I just thought about this. A lot of times when you're in sales and you're in a discovery call or a client meeting, you get excited and you want to help your customers. But do you know how many times, Meredith, I've even done it myself, where you jump in, you don't let your client finish the thought, but if you would take a step back and let them finish their thought, you could uncover even more. So be self-aware when it comes to that. That's a big tip that I work with a lot of sales leaders at different levels. And I love what you just said about believing the best in people. One of the things I talk about in my book is something called the trust tax. And the
Mhm.
trust tax is something that you go into these relationships, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, whatever it is, and you got a couple options. You can go in and you can be cynical, right? And you can think, oh, somebody's out to get me. They're going to take advantage of me, blah, 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 this and that. Or what I really learned from my father, who is amazing at this, is he went in believing in people,
Mhm.
believing that individuals had the best intention at mind. And I really think that if you look back at Learnit, some of the people who started earlier in their career, and I'm far from perfect, but they'll tell you, Damon believed in me. He gave me these opportunities. And there's been times, and when I get back to the trust tax, sure, let's just say you believe in 20 people, and then one or two of these people, they're not trustworthy. They kind of screw you over, for lack of a more professional term. Well, guess what? That doesn't mean I'm a big believer that is just a tax you pay, right? That's going to happen. And so I think you're better off keeping the mindset, like you said, of going into the relationship, thinking the best of people, learning from those who maybe you were a little naive and could have avoided. But, I just think that you're much better off not focusing on the negative, which takes up so much energy, and focusing on the positive and believing in your people, believing in your kids and your friends, and go from there. And then pay
Mhm.
the trust tax when it happens.
Yeah, I like that phrase. And it doesn't mean closing your eyes to what's in front of
Not at
you.
all. Not at
So if
all.
intuition picks up on some vibe that's not quite right, you
Mhm.
don't ignore that, but you don't assume the worst either. And I think that's important. I love the fact that in your book you have 4 chapters on being and 4 on doing. And I would love for you to talk about the distinction you make between those two, because I have strong feelings about those, and I just love the fact that you had those distinctions.
So in my book, which I hope if for the readers think it seems like having a conversation with me, it's pretty practical and approachable. And for the first half of the book is around being. It's about the mindset. Having whether you want to call it a growth mindset or a learn it all mindset, and it's really especially starts with being fully committed. If you're going to start your own business or take another job, be committed in what you do. Continuously want to learn. Learning is important, and also being means that stepping out of your comfort zone. Stepping out of your comfort zone and having the courage to try things differently. And that's because if you don't and you stay status quo, you're never going to keep learning. And so the being, I like to look at it. James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habit. I'm going to be a healthy person. Well, I'm going to be a learn it all leader. I'm going to be somebody that's continuously wanting to grow. That's where I'm going to come into it. The second half of the book is all about um, practical ways to do things, and I talk about, how chapter 5, I talk about having a party for Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose, which is pretty funny for those music fans out there. And it's about making bold decisions, making bold decisions as a leader, and also empowering your team to make a bold decision. Give them the resources and the space to do it. It also we talk about, in the second half of the book, what are some ways for setting clear goals, not just for yourself, but for your team, and how do you help keep each other accountable? And finally, maybe it's the learning and development in me, but it's all about investing in your team. Investing, whether it's coaching, whether it's doing assessments, whether it's executive, like I said, executive coaching, or training through Learnit. You need to set aside the time, well, the money, first of all, but more than that, the time. I've seen a recent article that 84% of individual contributors and middle managers want more learning, but they don't have the time, and I like to call it learning time off. So instead of paid time off, it's like carve out, as a leader, middle management, wherever you're at, give your team the space and the resources to continue learning. So that's like a practical tip that I talk about in my book.
I like that. Let's look at coaching for a minute, because it seems to me that more and more organizations are looking to managers to be coaches to their people. And I know that you, as a leader, really, I think, feel a strong responsibility about that role for you. What does it look like when you're coaching one of your people?
So first, I'm sure you talk about this a lot. I think there's a difference between being a leader and a manager. The leader is typically the one who sets the vision, sets the goals, and then the manager comes in and helps execute, which is important. Leaders tend to be the ones who are coaching. And what it means to me to coach is to work with individuals and help. If let's say you're on a sales call, I've been on 1,000 of these, and you're on the sales call, and it's the new sales rep or somebody's client. Give them the opportunity to kind of go in whatever direction they want to do, right? And even if it's not the best, you don't want to, like I talk about in my book that I learned from Mike Weinberg in one of the best books of all time, Sales Management Simplified. You don't want to be the hero. You don't want to jump in and do the work for them. Coaching is all about understanding what you can delegate, trusting your team to get the work done, and giving them the resources that they need to do it. And I think that great coaches for leaders need to have empathy and patience. I think that that's key when coaching, because it can be, let's be honest, it can be frustrating, and whether it's with our employees or a lot of the clients we work with, with the training and some of the work we do, yeah, it can be frustrating, right? But you got to have empathy and patience.
That patience is so key. And what I see also happening a lot, Damon, is people may not say they're impatient, but you see it in their body language. They're tapping the desk, or they're looking down, or looking around, or looking at their watch, or in some way with their body language indicating, hurry up, or this is, I'm just not focused on you. And I think that sends such a bad message to the person that, is looking to you for guidance, support, whatever it is that they were hoping to have in that moment.
It sends a terrible message. And Meredith, it's difficult, right? It's difficult because you got your Slack channel blowing up, you got text messages coming in, you got all kinds of stuff going on. And sometimes, I have one of my top leaders who's gotten so much better. I said, you come in coaching some of your team members. This is 8 years ago. She's much better now, with the teacher's voice. Nobody wants the teacher's voice. Do this, do this, do this. You need to be able to ask open-ended questions and listen, and give them the space to respond and really think through what they could do differently. It may seem like it takes a lot of time, but if you're trying to scale the growth of your team, you have to do that. You can't be a one-person Superman jumping in and doing all the work. Otherwise, people won't grow, and great high performers, Meredith, will leave. They'll leave. So, yeah, I think that really comes into it. And I think it starts really, I think you would agree, with self-awareness. What's your body language? Are you hunched over? Are you looking at something on the side? Is somebody, I like to ask my team, sometimes, how are things outside of work? Well, because I think what happens in your personal life, if you want to share it, affects your professional life. Well, if I'm asking them that and I'm playing on Instagram, that's just completely disrespectful. So you have to be aware of both your body language and what you're saying and the questions you're asking, and don't have what we talked about earlier. You ask somebody a question and people can see when you're formulating an answer already. You're not even paying attention to what they're going to say. You just can't wait to jump in and give them your thoughts. Doesn't work.
No, that's so true. Well, let's talk about your hiring practice because you've got some specific ideas and ways of bringing people on board. You're looking more for potential, I think, than the actual experience or technical know-how. Let's talk about what are you looking for, when you're in the hiring process or in the recruiting process. Who's your ideal kind of employee?
Well, I think it starts with hiring individuals who align with your values. At Learnit, our values is continuous learning, embracing change, acting like owners, not yet, rallying around the customer. Finding individuals that you believe that are in line with your values. Yeah, I'm a big believer in hiring for potential over experience. And I also am a big believer in improving strengths over weaknesses, but maybe that's something we can dive into based off what you do. For me, until the pandemic, Learnit had a location in the financial district of San Francisco for 28 years, surrounded by Salesforce, Stripe, Google. How is a company like Learnit, bootstrapped, going to compete with talent? And how we've always done it is we find people that we believe have, follow our values and can be fantastic, who don't have the experience, and then you believe in them and you give them the opportunity. It's like a testing ground almost. And Meredith, some of these individuals will stay 2 or 3 years and then they move on. I'm thinking about, we got somebody who's a CTO at Autodesk and the CEO of a student debt company. Amazing. I call it the Learnit alumni, but they all cut their teeth at Learnit, and quite frankly, we've brought in sometimes individuals who had 10 years of sales experience from a Microsoft. And that's been really difficult because it's a much different culture. So I think it's important to hire for potential over experience, when you can, if the role. I don't know if I would do that if you're just acquired a company and you're going from 5 million to 10 million and you need a COO. You might need somebody who has some experience. But then, and I'm also a big believer that you should treat your team like a team instead of a family. I think that as a leader at all levels, it's your responsibility to put the best team on the field at all times. And I've grown very close to individuals that Learnit, a lot of great friends. But there have been times, Meredith, where they've come to me and they've said, "Hey, D, I got to move on. I've reached my capacity here," and they move on. And there's been other times where I'm like, "Hey, you know what? It's time for you to go. You've been here 15 years. You're going through the motions." And the great thing about that for your listeners is that we've created this like referral engine, like the flywheel of all these individuals go out. And when they find somebody who's relatively new in their career or somebody who wants to go from being an accountant to sales, if they think that they have the attitude and the values in line with Learnit, they text me and say, "I got this person who's great, fits right in for Learnit." So that's like one of the main ways. If you look at our staff of about 50, 60 people, a lot of internal referrals.
Well, that says a lot to me about how you treat them when they're there and also their offboarding experience. You're not sending them an email saying you're gone. There's an experience you're creating for them that causes them to leave with a good feeling about the company and what you stand for. Otherwise, they wouldn't be making those referrals.
Well, and also keep in mind, and this is important too, and it's been tough over the years, but I've had some of my top producers in their prime at Learnit, and they'd always say, "Hey, Damon, can we go for a walk? Can we have a talk?" And I'm like, "Uh-oh, here it comes," you know. And they'll just be like, "Hey, I've really enjoyed working at Learnit. You've been great. I learned so much." You know how it goes. And they're saying, "Unfortunately, I'm moving on." And as a leader, you have two choices. You can get upset and burn bridges, or you can thank them for what they've done and help them transition gracefully. And Meredith, I can't tell you how many times people have come back 6 months, 9 months, 2 years, because they're like, because keep in mind, a lot of these individuals are early on in their career, so they don't know what other cultures are like. So they go to some startup or they go to some fancy company and they're like, "Hey, you know what? I miss Learnit. The grass isn't greener." And more often than not, if they were a top performer and they left professionally, I'll give them an opportunity to come back. And those could become some of your most loyal, your best employees who also you could learn from. And you could learn. So tell me at ABC Company when you were there, how do they hold their all hands meetings? What's their sales approach? You can do all this stuff. So though it's important to bite your tongue, wish them the best of luck, and hopefully help the onboarding be as professional as possible.
I love that, because too often that doesn't happen, and people part with bitter feelings and negative and negative attitude towards that company, and they would never refer anyone to that organization. So it kudos to you and your leadership team for creating an environment where people feel good while they're there, and also after they've left, to make those kinds of referrals to you. When you bring people on board, what are some of the things that you do initially to help them feel successful as early as possible?
Well, before we bring them on board, we kind of do a couple of litmus tests to see if they're a good culture fit. What was the last book you read? What's your thoughts on learning? Give us an example of when something didn't go well. All kinds of questions that we want to vet before they come on board. And then when you bring people on board, and this is hard, okay, this is hard, and this is something we help our customers with a lot, because with our customers, I have this one gentleman who he's not new to this organization. It's a big kind of healthcare company, but he got promoted to being a sales leader. And he's like, "I just got promoted. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know if I think I have the skill set, And they just kind of threw him in there. And, fortunately, we got him into some Learnit classes that he was sponsored for. But I think it's really important, and Courtney Ritchie on my team is awesome at this, is building a structured onboarding plan, at least for the first couple of weeks, and trying to get them. I always meet with people for the first day. The first day I give them the Learnit story. They read my book, because I think a lot of the cultures, started with, my thoughts around leadership. And then it was easier, of course, Meredith, when everybody was in person. Now everybody's distributed, but I want to get them engaged in collaborating with others, and not just others in their role, but let's say that they're an accountant. Well, understand, what do the teachers do here? How do we make this a cohesive, collaborative environment? So I think that throwing people to the wolves and just saying, "Go ahead and figure it out," or even just taking a couple classes, is not the way to go about it. I think that it's time, it's critical. And I think if you look at, I saw some number, I don't know if this is true, that there's like companies, it costs them 1.6 million in attrition annually. I think a lot of that has to do with poor hiring and onboarding decisions that companies make. What do you think?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. For one thing, all of us want to feel we matter and that we're cared about. And when a new company they've joined takes the time to have someone help them learn the ropes, so they don't feel like they're just, sink or swim kind of situation, I think that's huge. So I applaud you for seeing the wisdom of doing that and putting that in place so that people feel comfortable with the company and their role, and understanding, it sounds like what you do is help them understand the bigger picture. What are all the different roles in the company and where does yours fit in? What part do you play so that they don't, have those blinders on and just see what's right in front of them? It goes back to what you said earlier. If you want to just stay on a track, don't work here. This is not what we're looking for. So to encourage them to raise that awareness so that they really see and understand how the different pieces fit together. I think that's huge for building commitment and enthusiasm for the vision of the company.
You're spot on. And what I heard you saying in there is they need to understand the purpose, what your goals are. Like Learnit's purpose is we want to make better leaders for the future. I got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. It's important to me that we build better leaders for the future. And we're able to have that. We're able to have that impact at Learnit, right? So that's like, let's say that's our company goal or vision. If you're in accounting or you're at the front desk, how does your role and what you do connect with your company's purpose? And it's obviously harder for 1,000-person companies and this and that, but we work really. I don't want people coming in to Learnit as paycheck players. They come in, they get paid, they leave. I'm not saying work extra hours, nothing like that. But I want them to really believe in what our vision is and our goals and get behind it and help us all being aligned with those vision and goals. Just like I mentioned earlier with Andy Lopez on winning the College World Series. I don't think most of the team believed it at the beginning of the year, but as the year went on, people really got behind it. And every decision we made, every practice the coaches weren't around, the team was doing what they needed to do to hit that goal, which they did.
That's great. Well, as we get kind of wrapping up here, what are some things that I haven't asked you about, either in the book or things that you do at Learnit that you would like my listeners to know?
Well, I would say one of the big topics in my book is around imposter syndrome. I think we all deal with imposter syndrome, and I got a 3-step approach to overcoming it. First, before you get to step 1, you identify what scares you, and then step 1 is be consistent and work hard. I think that I'm not saying put in 10, 14 hours, but work hard. Number 2 is focus. It's easy to get distracted. Deliberate practice, so they say. And then step number 3, let's say it's about giving presentations. Let's say that I'm doing a keynote and this is relatively new for me. Well, if I've put in the hard work and I've practiced and I've really focused on what I've done, when it's game time, Meredith, learn and let go. Just go for it. Do the best you can do. That's all you could do as a human. And if it goes fantastic, great. If you fall on your face, people might laugh or say whatever. But remember, those people have their own lives and they're going to forget about you soon. So yeah, work hard, focus. Once you've done that, learn and let go. And don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself, and that's just the one other area that most people have reached out to me about, Meredith, at all levels, from judges to CEOs, are like, let's talk about that. You know what I mean? Because if somebody tells you that they don't have imposter syndrome or the inner critic, I don't believe that they're being honest with you.
It goes back to that self-awareness. Do you realize that that's what's happening within you? Some of the questions you ask yourself, we have to pause and notice, what is it we are saying to ourselves that cause us to feel unworthy or like we're not qualified or whatever those limiting thoughts and beliefs are. We have to be aware of them first before we can make a decision to change it. But I really like your 3 steps. That's so helpful. And Damon, I really want to recommend to my listeners that they get your book, The Learn It All Leader. Yes. And let them know how they can connect with you and get a copy of your book and learn more about what Learnit is doing.
Sure. So there you can go to our website. Learnit's a virtual instructor-led training company. We do have some videos, but it's mostly virtual instructor-led, some in person. Our website is learnit.com, learnit.com. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to be much more active on LinkedIn. I'm getting out of my comfort zone there, posting hopefully good content. And my books, obviously, well, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get books. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn and you say that you heard me on Meredith's show, I'll give you a code for yourself or somebody in your organization or a couple people in your organization who could benefit from some free training. And our public classes, they're 2 hours, but they're about $250 a pop. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. Hit me up on LinkedIn and I will send you some codes to some free training. And I'd love to hear what you think about Learnit's classes.
That's great. Damon, thank you so much for joining me today. And also, I want to just acknowledge you as a leader, as a human being who's really putting yourself out there to share what you've learned over these past 28 years or more in your various roles and the work that you're doing. It matters and it's making a difference. And I want to thank you for who you are.
And I want to thank you, Meredith, for who you are. For your listeners, I've had a couple conversations with Meredith before and after. And I just met her, and she's been so giving, and I've learned a lot from her. And so I'm really grateful for that. So thank you in return.
Well, I appreciate that, Damon, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.